Welcome to the Reading City Council meeting for December 1st, 2020. Please join me in the prayer and a pledge. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, deliver us from evil. Amen.
Pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands,
One
nation under God,
indivisible,
with
liberty and justice
for all.
Mr. Albrink, can we have the council member roll call, please?
Sure. Mr. Powell?
Here.
Mr. Gertz?
Here.
Mr. Lind?
Here.
Mr. Albrink? Here. Mr. Lindeman? Here. Mr. Fischesser?
Here.
Don's there too.
Is that a Chico?
Don looks frozen there for a second.
I'm here.
No, he's moving.
All present.
Okay. Thank you for sitting in for our clerk tonight, Mr. Albrink. There are no minutes to approve tonight. We are still looking for some information from our guest speaker last week, Mr. Brooks. So those will probably come out in 2 weeks. I would like to go ahead and introduce our guest speaker tonight, Mr. Todd Owens. He's the City of Reading Fire Chief. Todd's here to go over the business of his department. Plus, I think he has a few other reports to give us. So when you're ready, Mr. Owens.
Thanks, Chris. First, I'll start off with our incidents to date in Reading. Currently, year to date, we have made 2,425 runs, which is an increase of 3.5% over 2019. As you know, we started doing Amberley Village as EMS at the beginning of the year. And that's probably part of the increase, because if we remove their runs, we're actually down 6%. We did trend down during the height of the initial lockdown or shutdown, if you will, with COVID by about 17%. So we haven't regained those numbers from this past spring. And last year to date, we had 2,346 runs. We have a lot of simultaneous runs. Almost 22% of our runs so far year to date have been simultaneous runs. And 2% of those runs, we have 3 runs or more at one time. Fortunately for us, we're able to manage about 80% of those runs internally with Reading personnel. We've only used mutual aid 34 times for medical response so far this year, which I think is pretty commendable, having 2,400 runs and only have about 1.5% of those being mutual aid. Most of our incidents in Reading are medical, 82%, and the rest are fire runs. We make our responses typically with 6 to 5 personnel based on who's scheduled or on vacation that day. On medical runs, you'll see us respond on our medic unit, the ambulance, and a pickup truck. So we respond with 2 paramedics at a minimum. And then if we don't need all those personnel to transport the patient to the hospital, we return 1 back so we can fully utilize all of our scheduled personnel. On a fire run in town, everybody goes. So whoever's on duty scheduled that day takes the engine and the ambulance on the fire run. If we're out of town, based on the nature of the dispatch, if it's truly a structure fire, the shift supervisor has the latitude to go ahead and increase the staffing to 4 as needed for that structure fire response out of town. When we get those simultaneous runs, it's up to the supervisor of how they're going to staff. We typically staff 2 ambulances a day, which if the second ambulance is dispatched, it generates a recall and temporarily takes our engine out of service. But with that, we also get a 3rd transport medic unit staff. So then we can manage the next available emergency that comes up, be it fire or EMS. We started by late last year, we shifted around some of our equipment, and we have 3 equipped medic units now, and we're able to staff that, like I said, about 80% of the time, which is, to me, it was phenomenal. And that's done with recall personnel, since a lot of our folks live here in Reading, if not nearby. We do provide contracted service to the villages of Arlington Heights and Amberley Village. Arlington Heights is contract, as you guys know, because you approved it this past summer, renewed beginning January of this year until 2025. And we're almost completed with the first full year of our Amberley contract. We met with them. I had a Zoom meeting with them a month or so ago. They're thrilled. They're very happy with the service they've received. We've had no complaints. The response times are much better than we anticipated, because we were concerned. That was one of our bigger concerns about taking over providing EMS to Amberley Village, was our potential inability to get to certain areas of the jurisdiction in an untimely manner. So we're doing pretty well with that. And our folks are just doing a wonderful job across the board making these runs, because they are busy. One thing that you may have noticed in the community, there's a mobile stroke unit now that went in service in August. It's a University of Cincinnati Health asset. They simultaneously are dispatched on any reported stroke or any indication of a stroke. If the symptoms, when they go through their algorithm, the dispatcher or the call taker can determine whether or not the stroke unit should be dispatched, and they're dispatched simultaneously with our Reading unit. So there will always be a Reading unit on scene with this mobile stroke unit from UC. Ironically, the first mobile stroke unit run was made here in the city of Reading on one of our fire department members' mothers. So with a good outcome. So we've had it in town a fair amount. It's pretty fortunate to have that kind of asset regionally, so close to our community. At first, we didn't think that they would be close enough to respond in a timely manner, but they are. Actually, they're based out of Springfield Township, and they hop right on cross county and they get here pretty quick. One of the things that kind of overtook our operations this year early on was COVID. So we had to make some significant changes early on. And we did a lot of those changes March 12th. So right when things were starting to get shut down and ramp up as it related to COVID, not knowing what to expect, if we had the equipment, the PPE, so on and so forth. So fortunately for us, we never went without PPE. Actually, we always had adequate PPE here at Reading. N95s are running low on gowns and things like that. And we were quickly able to get some supplies from the EMA. So that was fortunate. When COVID impacted our operations, we went ahead and changed the way we made contact with patients. For instance, if they were able to meet us at the door, they would meet us outside, or we'd only send one person in to try to limit our exposure, not knowing how the contagion worked at that time. It's obviously not as virulent as suspected it was back then. So, but we tried to limit exposure of our personnel as much as we could, even to the point where we had our police units stage outside, not even bringing them in unless they were needed for some type of criminal activity or other manpower otherwise. So we had to get used to working in mass, having the PPE and doing things a lot differently. One of the things that was an initial concern was we weren't allowing riders to be in the ambulance with us. So, which is kind of not something we do. We try to do what we can from a customer service standpoint to do whatever we can for the family member as well as the patient. But at the hospital, they weren't allowing visitors anyway. So it was better off for that patient's family to stay home and let the hospital make contact with them. Some of the non-emergency changes that we made, we limited access into the firehouse. So only essential personnel, city employees. So we limited access into the firehouse to limit that cross-contamination and exposure of our fire department personnel. We suspended inspections, station tours, all of our public presentations, CPR programs. We do some stuff with our business partners here in town. So we had to suspend all those. The birthday parades are very well received. We've done a fair amount of those during COVID, so to a wide age group. So that's been very well received, and people are very appreciative of our ability to do that. The only in-home thing that we continued that's non-emergency is I was still conducting adoption inspections because all that paperwork is timely. So we made sure we took care of those inspections for people. One of the other things associated with COVID is that the fire department tends to get a lot of calls regarding, hey, here they're not wearing a mask, here they're not doing this. The fire department is not taking those complaints. I encourage everybody to take those complaints directly to Hamilton County Public Health. We've not been provided any resources for enforcement otherwise. So that's our recommendation, and the health district's fully aware of that. We just don't have the ability to enforce those types of restrictions. So we continually evaluate, alter our guidelines, and it's been edited multiple times since March. So we continue to look at that. Chief Gallo's been integral in researching this, keeping up on what the hospital systems are doing, CDC, and he's done a wonderful job keeping us all up abreast of the concerns with the changes in the guidelines. Unfortunately, we've had 2 members test positive, but fortunately they're back to work and they did well. And I think I have one more that might have a test come back positive here soon. So it's a concern, and it's close to home. So we isolate those people that we believe are concerned to us, our personnel, encourage them to get tested or to maintain their isolation until they're symptom free or they have a negative test. And as of midnight today, we had 163 positive cases in Reading. That's the highest number we've had in any one day since I've been getting these statistics. About a month ago, we were at 23 or so. And then it just shot up mid-November. So we're at 163 positives right now. It's dynamic. It's ever changing. So I would encourage everybody to wear a mask. Obviously, isolate yourself the best you can from other people, especially if those people are symptomatic. Contact your primary care physician before you go to the ER, because there's something to be managed before you go to the hospital. Hospitals are getting busy. So if you're not an extremis with breathing or having other issues, we encourage you to make contact your primary care physician or wait until you develop symptoms before you go to the hospital. I think that's all I have right now, unless somebody's got some questions for me.
Not on a scale. I'm sorry, go
Go
ahead.
ahead, Mr. Deco. Chico,
I just
sorry.
had someone ask if there's a way we can post weekly on the community forum or either maybe the city's Facebook page about the number of cases.
Yes, I have produced a graph daily of those runs, and I'm more than happy to distribute that.
Great.
Who else? Someone else had it.
Yes.
Mr.
I did.
Lindemann, go ahead.
Todd, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much additional burden has this COVID-19 been on the department?
I would say that just some of the operational changes have been more impactful than anything else, because we had to change certain things. From a response standpoint, quite frankly, we're treating everybody as if they're infected. So we're using PPE on every run. I would say it is impactful, but it's not overwhelming at this point for us. Yes, we know we've transported known positive patients, but I would say that we're handling it well. Like I said, the personnel here are unbelievable. I've got some of the best coworkers on the planet. I'm very fortunate as a fire chief to have such skilled staff. They're handling it professionally, and we're plugging away. Hopefully we don't see a great influx of cases in Reading, but it doesn't appear that that's going to calm down anytime soon. On a side note with that, we are a point of distribution through Hamilton County Public Health, and they have been in contact with us regarding the potential of opening our pod to do mass immunizations. Now, I don't have a timeline, but they're thinking maybe within a month, 6 weeks, that plan could be. I don't know if that would be when the immunizations would start, but that plan would be out there. So we have 2 pods in Reading. One's a closed pod for Mount Notre Dame, so the sisters can take care of themselves up there with our nursing staff. And then we have a pod for Arlington Heights and Reading, which we utilize Mount Notre Dame High School as the site, similar to we did in, I think it was 2008 with H1N1. So
On a scale of 1 to 10, can I say 2? It's not really that much of an impact, or am I wrong?
I would say, yeah, low 2, 3.
Okay, well, that's good.
I have a
Todd?
question on the numbers, Todd.
Yes.
When you report since midnight and you say what, 165,
163.
163. Now, is that new cases in the last 24 hours or is that the total?
That's the total cases. So
Okay.
from the day I had 100, just to give you representative, that's a good question. To give you representative information, yesterday was 160, the day before was 153. So we've went up 10 new cases in 2 days.
Okay.
Hey, Todd,
Yeah.
couple things. I know you and I have talked about it. We've got an ordinance on the agenda tonight to amend a couple of other ordinances. Could you kind of briefly go over that so that everybody here is on the same page with what exactly we're doing and why we're getting rid of that insurance?
Yeah. That's accidental insurance. That was supplemental. It's similar to like an AFLAC, if you will. Back in the day, our association, when we had more volunteers, paid for that insurance. I don't know the year of when that insurance was rolled into the city paying for. I think it was in the early 2000s. But that's back when we had a predominantly volunteer part-time staff. So if they were injured or if they had some type of debilitating injury, that they would have supplemental insurance otherwise above their BWC insurance. Unfortunately, with the way our staff has changed, since we only have one volunteer left, and then we're all part-time, if they work greater than 28 hours a week, they're not eligible for those benefits. I have one person that is every pay period, which is our only volunteer left. And I talked to him directly about this, and he agrees that with the increase in costs, this went up 25% from last year to this year. It was $1,700 and now went to $2,200. And he agrees that it's really not a benefit to him, which is the one I was concerned about because it was for the volunteer employees. And the two part-time employees that it would impact, one of which is full-time for another department. So the insurance is a supplement to whatever BWC would give them. They're still all eligible for BWC benefits with this insurance. The other element of that ordinance talks about healthcare. In the part-time ordinance, it references the ability to buy healthcare, which our broker is not even willing to do. So that's where those two elements of that ordinance come in.
Okay, then I guess the other question I have, Todd, is are you comfortable and prepared to talk about that new squad tonight, or would you rather come back on that?
No, I can talk about that. I didn't, if you want to wait till legislation portion and we can talk about it then or talk about it now.
No, I wasn't even going to bring it up until next year, that particular ordinance.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I can talk about it this evening or whatever you want to do. We're all here.
Just kind of give them a background to it. I know the committee has already put their stamp of approval on it, but just for the others that aren't here and for the public so that they understand what's going on.
Okay. The ambulance purchases are expensive. We're slated to buy one in 2022, and that unit was slated to cost $290,000, which is it's just getting expensive. So the last ambulance we purchased, we were looking for a used ambulance that we could remount. We thought we had one lined up, but unfortunately that fell through. Very awkward dealing with another local community, but we were able to secure a ambulance from Blue Ash. We had talked about them. We talked with them last year, knowing that they're going to build an ambulance in 2022, I believe, 2021. But unfortunately, that ambulance blew a motor. So fortunately for us, we were able to pick up that unit for $5,000. So we're buying basically the box. So we bought the box of the ambulance that to be remounted on a new chassis. In the course of doing that, we're going to save, we estimate about $62,000. We think probably a little bit more by remounting that box onto a new chassis. So we've already planned to do remounts. Our first remount was going to be in 2026. This unit that we were proposing for 2022 was going to be a brand new unit built specific for us, for Reading. But we couldn't pass up this opportunity with the Blue Ash unit. And we're just trying to look at ways to save money. They're very expensive to purchase. So it's a good deal, we believe, for us. And it also kind of resets what we're paying for ambulances. The last full ambulance we purchased, complete, I don't have that number directly in front of me, but I think it was $240-some thousand. That's with the cot and power load system and everything like that. That was a new one, but that was a smaller unit that was purchased a few years ago.
Okay.
But ultimately, the project
I
was saved
appreciate that.
$62,000, and we believe that to be on the low end.
Okay.
Yeah, this is,
I can't hear you.
go ahead, Chris.
I was just gonna say, if there was anything else, go ahead. Go ahead, Randy. You had something?
Yeah, it just, this is just another example of how our employees, work to save the city as much money as they possibly can. And the fire department is renowned for doing that. Of course, their equipment is god awful expensive too. I guess a little tip of the hat to Mr. Gertz. He set up the fire EMS capital fund and has kind of guarded that. And if it wasn't for that fund, Todd and I've already talked, there's a chance we might not even have a fire department at this point because of, if nothing else, the cost of equipment. Because if a squad's at 250,000, I can guarantee you a pumper is going to be $750,000 by the next time we need one.
Yeah, we predict it'll be 670 for our next engine in 2026.
Yeah,
we try to stay on top of that. I know I presented it to you guys in person, but yeah, we try to stay on top of those future valuation numbers so we can adequately predict what we're going to need and to moving forward.
And then one other thing, Todd, you were talking about, and this is more for the public that they can kind of understand the way the fire department operates. You were talking about, the recall. And, can you explain to them that, this is actually full-time people that are coming back in or the part-time people are coming back in off duty and staffing for us?
Yes. Once our second ambulance is dispatched, it automatically generates a recall. With that recall, we staff an additional equipped medic unit and they backfill the engine because those other people that are on station are now making that subsequent medical run. So we're fully utilizing all of our on-station personnel and our recall personnel. And it's worked out very well for us. And that's one of the benefits. And I think it's a big deal and it's kind of a feather in our hat that we have so many people that work for our department that live in our small community. So, which I think is wonderful. And being able to manage most of our runs in-house is impressive. I still can't get over that. We've only used, I think I said it before, we've only used mutual aid, received mutual aid for medical runs 34 times when we have a total runs of almost 2,500. To me, that's pretty impressive. It's very unique. A lot of other departments, actually, I don't know any other departments that really do that are career staffed.
Any other
questions? Now, I just want to thank Todd for coming and taking time out of his night to be with us. And, as much as the safety committee is always there if you need us. So, again, thanks.
I appreciate it. Mr. Lynn, you had your hand up before.
I have some questions too.
I just raised my hand whenever I can't hear somebody.
Oh,
okay. Sorry.
Mr. Gertz, go ahead.
Yeah, Todd, just to digress for a moment, you said there were 163 cases that have tested positive. Do you have any knowledge as to how many of those people who tested positive actually were hospitalized or had symptoms or actually got sick, or the status of that? I mean, I'm curious if, if 163 people went to the hospital, that's one thing, but if 163 people tested positive is quite another. Do you have any kind of statistic about that?
I don't have a hard number, but looking at the lists and the names and the addresses associated with them, I know a lot of these people, and a lot of them haven't been hospitalized that I'm aware of.
They
A lot of them
not.
have not,
Okay.
and a lot of their symptoms subsided pretty quickly. So, which is fortunate.
Yes. Well, I just concerned that, I've heard these statistics of things and the hospitals are jammed, and, of course, the CARES Act does reimburse the hospitals quite substantially for people who contract COVID and so forth. But that was concern of how many people actually, even though they test positive, doesn't mean necessarily that they're going to end up in a hospital. Or even my own family physician who had some work done, is going to have some hip work done, tested, and then had 2 days. He was sick with like an influenza, but they rescheduled his surgery, So I do want people to know that out of 11,000 people, approximately 163 have tested positive. So I wouldn't get a sense of panic. I would worry about that a little bit. The other thing, how long does a unit last for the paramedic vehicles?
12 years.
12 years you get out of them?
Yeah, and chances are the one that we have, we're not going to trade it in. So we're going to probably maintain that as a reserve, because that's the one that had the motor replaced, I believe, 2 years ago. So, and we get nothing for these in trade. For us to buy the unit that we bought from Blue Ash is a 2012. I don't know. Well, I had the title, but I think they spent over $200,000 for the unit when they bought it, and we bought it for $5,000. So that gives you an representative value of the units over time. So.
Well, I want to compliment you on your hard work that you do. I'm very happy, and I often say that I think you do an excellent job, not just with, I guess it's part of the fire protection, but also in the past when we've had some issues with, I was talking to the law director before we started the meeting with demolitions and taking care of blighted properties. You've also been very helpful in doing all that, Todd. And Chief, I appreciate all that, because we don't want all our community to go and get into a depreciated state, And I did want to comment that I don't know what Mr. Fishesser, I appreciate your reference. I mean, we may have helped start a fund, Mr. Albrink and I, but really you have to go back to an old fireman, Bud Neuner, who really got the paramedic and ambulance service provided. Before that, Mr. Schmidt used to be the ambulance service at the Schmidt-Donow Funeral Home. So and my father, actually, maybe you were referring to him and your father, he was the safety director when a lot of this got off of the ground, Bill Fishesser. So whatever we did kind of continue it along and try to support it. But there were many people in our community that brought this forward and has done a great job. I think what's interesting, though, I like this one statistic, 82% of the runs are paramedic runs. Only when you look at that, 18% are fire runs. So in reality, we really have greater analysis of that we're a paramedic service, probably more than we are a fire department anymore. So I don't know how that will reflect over the years, but it's an interesting statistic, I think, that we have to look at in an analysis of our operations as well. So anyway, I appreciate your coming, Todd. You're always welcomed, either directly or at the meeting. So appreciate you coming. Thank you.
No problem. I'll catch up with Patrick regarding putting that data on the website, Ms. Edichico. I did see that Facebook post right before I got online here. So yeah, it's nice for people to see. And I do want to reiterate what Mr. Gertz had just said. When you look at 163 to nearly 11,000 people, and that's only in Reading, that doesn't include Arlington or Amberley. It is a very small number. And fortunately for us, we've had some deaths, and we all know the ones that we've had that have passed and are tragic. It's such a minute amount in relation to the big picture of this. So.
Yeah, but do you attribute it to the fact that we just don't catch coronavirus, or that the people of Reading are doing a very good job of protecting themselves and others from the coronavirus?
I'm not getting the few complaints I have received and given to the health district. It's been just a few. I think people are being more cognizant of how they manage themselves in public, but I don't think our experience is much different than any other community in the area. It's impacting all areas of our community, all age groups. We can't even isolate, because I mean, I even looked at trend. Are we seeing more in one area? But we're not even getting anything there that's pointing a finger at anything in particular. So I think people are just being mindful. They're being more cognizant of how they protect themselves and their families and the community by wearing masks and just isolating themselves from people.
It's a compliment to the people of Reading now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Chris, one thing.
Yes, Mr. Lindeman.
Actually maybe two. Appreciate, Todd, you explaining that ordinance a little bit better tonight that we're going to have. That's helpful. I know that I've had at least one other person ask about it. The other thing is that Randy talks about how much overtime that the fire department has to work to get those nice salaries. And I think you pointed that out quite clearly tonight, that it's necessary if we're going to provide the service.
Yeah, and
I think
our
that
guys
gets
do a wonderful
lost.
job and they're committed.
I think it gets lost sometimes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. And
Great-
you, as
great
we tell all
job.
our guests, go ahead. Did you have something, Mr. Gertz?
No, I was just complimenting Todd. Just a great
Okay.
job he's done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, like we tell all our guests, you don't need to stick around for the rest of the meeting. You're welcome to, depending on what you've got for the night and what you need to get accomplished for tomorrow.
Well, I appreciate it. The only thing I was going to stay around for legislation. If you guys had any questions regarding the ordinance for the insurance, the
Okay.
ambulance, if you guys had any questions, by all means, reach out to me. I know Mr. Lindeman was there at the safety committee meeting and heard the more detailed description, if you will, of the ambulance remount. So,
Okay. Well, it'll be a little bit of time between now and our normal agenda time for those ordinances.
okay. So I'll probably sign off then. You guys have a Merry Christmas if I don't see you.
Okay.
I'm sure I'll see you guys before then. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, Todd. We don't have any other audience participation that I know of besides our guest speaker. Reading of any communications, Mr. Albright?
We have none for tonight.
Okay. Council committee reports. Finance Chairman, Mr. Gertz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. President, I've been trying to look over what the numbers are. I appreciate the fact that Sabrina has given me some data and some information as well. And I don't want to steal her thunder, but I did want to know about grants that we were receiving. Pardon me, specifically from the Duke. We have received a total of $30,000 from Duke for a grant. That 12,000 of it went for some park updates, and 18,000 went for a master plan for parks, of which maybe Mr. Lind later can give us a lot more detail of what that's all about, because I have little or no knowledge of how that money was being spent. I think 5,000 went to Envisions, which is a engineering or a consulting firm. Another $10,000 went for the rehabilitation of the Doughboy, which is very appreciative, I guess, with the $40,000 that Duke has provided. But I guess to be cynical or be a conspiracy theorist, I am a little apprehensive about two things. Number one, I think if we receive funds that are put into the city's revenue source, there should be some type of ultimate appropriation from the council towards how those monies should be spent. And I don't know that that has happened. At least it hasn't happened to my knowledge that there's been any separate appropriation for these monies. Now, granted, Duke may have given us a $30,000 grant that was going to be used for recreation, which as a member of council, I likely would support if we knew how that was going to be spent and how it was going to be used. And in general, I would say I would probably go along with any of those things. And certainly we wanted to remember the improvements to the Doughboy. That was done an excellent job this past year of celebrating its centennial and so forth. However, I don't know about the mechanics of how this was used and how it was spent. I'm questioning that as far as finance, and I would like to explore that maybe further with either someone from the state auditors, or I don't know, maybe Mr. Stevenson could provide me some data. But the two things that I'm concerned about, Mr. Feldman, I haven't talked to him in recent times, but he pointed out to me that his suspicions that the Duke has been providing all of these grants to numerous communities, and especially the ones that are going to have this pipeline go through it or in the areas where the pipeline is going. So I don't want to put myself or the city in a position where we're owing anybody for the success of what they want to achieve. Now, as I say, I guess I'm a cynic, and that's too bad. That's my nature sometimes in looking at these things. I worry about that kind of an issue because Justin brought it up to me, and then as I looked in to see how much we received, it did raise some questions with me about that possibility. So, when we look at these grant monies that are coming through here, and then of course, upping the amount of the price for the easements to, I think, 112 or whatever it was, 120% of the estimated figure, that makes me a little more suspicious because as I'm assuming all of us still oppose this pipeline going through the city of Reading. Now, compliments to Mr. Stevenson and our efforts to do everything we can legally to stop this. Nevertheless, I guess the board in Columbus has saw fit to allow this to go through our community in areas where I think it absolutely does not belong. So I am worried about the methods that are being used to coax us into being acquiescent, to say the least, as government fathers or mothers as well, to go along with this because of the amount of money they're putting forth. Just because we're going to get a couple $100,000 in easements doesn't justify my worries that in my ward especially, and the people who are going to be looking at the possibility of any dangers if they see or worries that they have, and as the whole system is unfolding. So that raises a question in the finance, at least I think part of the finance committee. Also, I'm curious if we've heard anything, because this comes into finances, about new revenue. As you're well aware, Linda Fitzgerald and Brenda Weimer were came before council about 6 weeks ago or a month ago talking about the development of the north end property up there that used to be old many years ago, the Carlisle Chemical Company, the PNC property. And I thought the very next night they were going to go to the school board to get the approval on the tax incentive program, the TIF that they were looking for on for the income for real estate taxes. Does anyone have any knowledge? I know we have no one here from the administration apparently tonight. Maybe there's others that have some inside track to this, or I don't know if Sabrina does or David. Does anybody know whether that was passed by the school board to approve the TIF that we're looking for on that project?
I watched the school board meeting the next night, and essentially it was the same presentation that they presented to us. It was just more geared towards the school district as opposed to us. So I think it was more informational, that meeting after. I don't think it was ever intended to be that they were asking them to pass it then. It was just kind of an introduction. I'm unaware if anything further has occurred with that.
I agree with Mr. Powell. That's kind of where I saw it at because I watched the same meeting as well.
Well, I'm hoping that they're going to take some initiative. And I don't, we're investing money with Brenda Weimer for $400 an hour, which is worth her salt and her value in gold, I guess, to get this through. But some of it certainly is imperative for us to know that the school board is going to be on board with this. And it's been 6 weeks. I was hoping that we had a little more information. Maybe the law director could investigate it a little more directly, or David or Sabrina. I'd appreciate that, because they were talking several hundreds of jobs up there if we can get this thing off of the ground for the city already. And obviously we'll be looking at the need of that. Further, I wanted to raise the question, and I think Sabrina, I don't want to steal her thunder, but I guess the CARES Act has provided somewhere in the neighborhood of $570-some thousand through the county and the state, which I'm anticipating, if I see this correctly. Now, some other communities I'm aware are using it for forms of capital improvement and methods of communication and so forth, but it appears that we may be looking for it to just meet our overhead and our operations. I was looking at the October report that Mel provided. We are 2% below what we were last year in our revenues. And now I haven't heard, I think he told me we were holding our own for November. I guess we'll see where the next 2 months go. But not only were we anticipating maintaining our position, but my recollection when we submitted our budget to the county last summer, we were looking somewhere between 3 and 5% of an increase. So if you average that to 4 and then the 2% we're down, we're down. We're going to be down at the end of the year about $380,000 in that range. Now we did get some money from the Bureau of Workmen's Compensation, if I remember, and I think it was about $250,000. But we also have hanging out there in the shadows a settlement we have to make for an employee, which is going to put a big ding in some of this. So the reason I'm raising this is I'm a little apprehensive about moving too rapidly with doing these wage increases when we're in a situation where I don't know what, we may make it through the end of the year and hold our own, but in my discussion casually with Sabrina, and again, I thank you for your hard work, we really don't know where we're going to be next year, because any new stimulus work that's coming down the pike, it appears that Nancy Pelosi is playing politics and it's not going anywhere. And I guess they're waiting for the Georgia recount or the Georgia election to see how the Senate turns out. But, that puts all the rest of us hanging out there, as well as citizens that are in our community who are looking for, themselves, that are not put in very good financial position. And I really have empathy for many of the businesses, especially the restaurants and the bar industry and so forth, with the restrictions and the further proposals that I'm seeing about lockdowns, that it's going to hurt them severely. And I'm a little worried that, we should be looking to make sure we're keeping ourselves in a good financial position to take care of our needs. So financially, right now, I'm pleased to say we have not had to go out and borrow any money, to my knowledge. And again, I compliment Mel and Sabrina for the hard work earlier in the year to make sure that we have institutions that are ready, willing, and able to provide us with finances on a short-term basis if we need the money. And fortunately, we haven't had to exercise that right. But nevertheless, it's comforting to know that we have institutions and the hard work of these two people in our finance department to secure the ability to get that taken care of at the end of the day. So right now, I guess just keep saying your rosaries if you're Catholic, or what other prayers you say, that we balance out this year in the black and we're healthy, and but then we don't know where we're going to be in the next couple of years. I'm glad to see, like Todd did, that they do have a separate fund. They have adequate monies in that fund. We have about 30 individual funds that we operate through, but they have money in that fund to be able to take care of this vehicle that we're going to be needing at the beginning of next year. But that doesn't those funds don't deal with general operations. They're for capital expenditures and so forth. Don't have anybody have any questions or comments, but that's all I have tonight.
Oh, I do. Chris,
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Lindeman.
I can say that this council and the previous council, along with everybody in the administration, has done everything they can to fight the pipeline coming through Reading. The other thing is that, as you said, Mr. Gertz, many communities receive these grants, and I take it that Duke Energy is doing that to be a good partner with the citizens. And so I don't think it's unusual for us to be getting grants. It's a matter of what we do with the money and who's requesting it and whether or not the legislation should have anything to do with where the money's spent. I'm not sure, but make a good point.
Okay, anyone else?
Mr. President, Mr. President, is it okay if I jump in and talk about that CARES Act funding real quick since
Yes,
Mr.
go
Gertz
ahead.
brought it up? Okay, thank you. I had a correspondence with Patrick last week before the holiday, and in total for CARES Act funding, we got $577,932.08. With that being said, all this has to be COVID related. It's a reimbursement grant. The best way to kind of plug that in, as we heard Todd speak earlier, is fire and paramedic job response training and working has been heavily impacted, and also PPE for the various departments here at City Hall, as well as admin expenses for mailing letters to homeowners and the purchase of the Lucas device for the fire EMS, and one other device for $14,881. So the thing is you have to have it turned in, you have to have it pre-spent. There's no like carryover, and then if we didn't spend that amount of money, then we have to return it to like the county who returns it to the state. So with that being said, Patrick was able to do the analysis because we have to have backup for the auditors. The Treasurer's Department helped me create a new fund. It's called the 501, but I need to get that to zero by the end of the year. So I'll be writing an ordinance for our next meeting with that breakdown. And I know I just threw a bunch of numbers at you, but please know that there's no new cost added in here. This is all reimbursement cost on purpose because you have to have the paper trail of it done, spent, and gone out of your kind of arena. So with that being said, we're very happy that we got that. But as Mr. Gertz alluded to, I'm very protective over our money in general, and I'm not worried, of course, of 2020. I'm worried of 2021 because when we think about our gas tax that we get on the treasurer side, you know, people weren't driving in 2020. So what are we going to receive as a kickback in 2021? This is a patch for this year, but it also has to run us until next year. And of course, as the finance group of us, administration, treasurer, finance committee, and everybody else will be there to help and try to make sure everything's streamlined for this. So if anybody has any questions about that, like I said, I'll have the ordinance for our December 15th meeting, but I just wanted to jump in there and tell everybody that everything's already been spent for this. There's no control of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina.
Mr.
Any
Gertz,
other questions?
Mr.
for
Gertz,
Mr. Gertz?
Tony, what was $12,000 spent on that Duke thing at $30,000? There was a $30,000 grant, Denny, and of that, 12,000 was spent for park updates. Now, as I mentioned, I have never been privy to know specifically what that was spent on. I don't have the requisition orders and the purchase orders, but I'm sure that the treasurer and the auditor's office can delineate more specifically what that was spent on. My question was, just to give you a different example from my perception, if hypothetically Planned Parenthood came in here and gave us $500,000 for abortions, I would never support it as in my sense of righteousness. But if it were purely a grant, does that give the administration the arbitrary right to spend it as they see fit, or should it go through council and then be appropriated? So that's my issue, is that I am not, I'm suspect, I'm a conspiracy theorist over a lot of these things, but the money that came in, my opinion, should have been, just as when it should have been deposited and then then reappropriated to a particular fund or a particular purpose. Just as you're well aware, when we do our budgets, we're not always short. Sometimes we come with excess money. We actually appropriate less money than needed that we actually have as revenue. That has happened in the past. That doesn't give anybody in the administration the arbitrary right to spend the excess funds until it's appropriated into a proper account or a particular fund. And I just think that the same thing should apply to grants. Now, I haven't gotten into the legality or explored that in more detail, but I plan to. So the 12,000 that you asked about, all I know from Sabrina, she could be more, she keeps excellent books, but it was for park updates. The other 18,000 is for this master plan for parks, of which 5,000 has been spent, I'm told. So I have not heard any more back from the report. I just assume that sooner or later, when things unfold, we'll get Mr. Lind, I believe, is on the committee, but I don't know anybody else that's on the committee or what's going on with it. I don't know. If that,
Okay. Anything else? Thank you, Mr. Gertz. We'll go to utilities, lands, and buildings. Chairman, Mr. Lindeman.
Thank you, Chris. Just wanted to pass on some information that I received from Rumpke Recycling. Dean Furrier sent information that in 2021, they are going to begin picking up from residents and businesses plastic tubs, butter tubs, yogurt tubs, that sort of thing, fruit cups. Anyway, they'll be picking that up beginning in January. So if you want to get in on that, you might want to sign up for recycling here in this month, because it begins in January, and more material that we recycle, less goes into the landfill. And right now, it wouldn't affect us too much this generation, but generations to come, it's going to be very, very important. And we can try to save some of those problems by recycling now. To that effect, Christmas paper wrappings, boxes, soda cans, wine bottles, all those things can be recycled. And I know that Mr. Nesbitt has an abundance of those things this time of year. Anyway, I would appreciate it if people would sign up. I know that I haven't asked recently as far as how many people are recycling and the curbside recycling in Reading, but the number seems to increase, a couple every week. So maybe we can get above 1,000 here before the end of the year. And I think that's it. We do have 5 Tuesdays in December. If Sabrina or Patrick want to make note of that, if there's anything that has to be done, that's all I have.
Okay.
I had a question for Don. I haven't looked into it, but is the bench project now completed? Do you know, Don? Or is there
As far as
still?
I know, no, it's not.
Do you know what has to be accomplished to finish it completely?
I have to be honest, I have not been down there recently, but they said after the heat of the summer, they're going to plant trees and shrubs and that sort of thing. I confess I don't know if they've done that, but you bring up a good question, and certainly I will follow up on it.
Oh, I'm not faulting you. I just was curious. I hadn't got a chance to get down there either, but I guess Sabrina lives in the neighborhood. She'd probably know more than any of us. But
Well, Sabrina, just chime in there if you know.
I don't really know too much. I haven't seen any more work done down there, but then again,
It's dark when you get home, I'm sure.
I'll check on it, Mr. Gertz.
Well, I'm only allowed 18 ounces or 8 ounces of wine. We'll do it and then go down and check it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lindeman. Zoning, Planning, and Environment Chairman, Mr. Powell.
Chris. At our last meeting, Dan Brooks mentioned needing new software that had an initial purchase price plus annual cost as well. I think it might be worth setting up a separate account that would segregate a portion of the receipts of the building department to fund this software and other possible improvements to the building department. I will be contacting the building department to get additional details on the software and associated costs. To set a fund up like that, I mean, who would that be under your committee, Tony, or?
Well, frankly, I don't know that you need to do it in that fashion. I think it should be something that would be internally in his own funding, and set up an account that would be used for that, and then appropriate the money that into the account. I don't know that you need a separate delineation of a percentage of the monies that are generated as revenues to go towards that. It would not be that difficult to set something up. But I do agree, he brought up some very good things that we needed to explore. But I don't know if you have to get, I don't know if we need another fund. It would be a matter of setting up an internal subsidiary account in the money that's set aside for the building department.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted it to almost be self-funding, if you will, is why I was picturing a separate fund as opposed to us having to go find the money somewhere else to transfer into that. That was the only way I was looking at it that way.
Yeah, how effective a fund is in relationship to pulling funds from that account and put it into an internal account.
Right,
Gotcha.
since it's the general fund, Mr. Powell, Patrick kind of takes care of that on like the yearly basis in the beginning of the year, like within kind of the building department fund, because it's a general account, so it can kind of go under its little hub. So
Okay.
picture like the way you kind of set up an agenda with the A, the B, and then the C, and then the 1, 2, and 3. That's kind of how the fund accounting goes. So it doesn't have to be like a separate account completely. It would just be within the fund, and it can go under miscellaneous, but it has to be appropriated. And then, you know, I don't know, like the discussion between you, him, Mr. Brooks, and then administration, to kind of figure out, you know, how's that's going to come from, what are we going to utilize, or what can we lessen within the year to do it, or are there some big projects coming over the horizon that would self-fund it for the revenue that the building department brought in, if that makes sense at all?
Yeah. Okay.
Question for you there, Dave. Several months ago, we passed legislation to fund new upgrades for computers, I believe in Sabrina's office and Mel's office. I called and talked to Patrick and asked him if there was any money left in there, or would have money for a computer for the mayor. And he said he'd have to look into it, but there was a possibility. I believe that the cost, Dan Brooks said, was something like $2,500. So maybe Sabrina or Mel can tell us how that the computer project's going, and if there would be money left for that.
So the computer project, you guys approved it for.
We've
Can't
lost
hear
you
you,
now.
Sabrina. Didn't hear you, Sabrina.
Hello. Hey, sorry, Mr. Lindeman. We're going to hit the 35,000 that was approved for that pretty soon without any other extra purchases. So that would have to be a new ordinance to take it out of the 827 if that's what you wanted to do.
That may be something we should consider, just amending that to include a couple of these other things that I think are necessary.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm glad you're looking into that, Dave. Mr. Powell, that was very good.
Do have one other thing, Chris,
Go ahead.
real quick. I continue to monitor a parking situation on Maple Drive that a constituent asked me to look into. It appears that vehicles belonging to people that live elsewhere are being stored on the street. That, combined with the requirement that vehicles be parked 3 feet or more from driveways, has created a parking crunch on a street with parking on only one side of the street. I'm kind of keeping an eye on it. It looks like one of the vehicles has been moved, so I'm, kind of keeping an eye on it, and hopefully it'll resolve itself. But I'm just kind of brainstorming what legislatively, if there's anything that we could pursue about storing vehicles that don't belong to residents on the streets.
Okay.
And I
Anyone-
asked Tony if he would follow up on that amendment to include a computer system that they need in the building department, as well as a computer for the mayor.
Well,
That
two things.
amendment,
Go ahead. Well, two things. Number one, the building department's under the administration. Certainly they should initiate what their needs are. And I do agree. I think that Mr. Brooks did an excellent job coming before us the other night. And I want to compliment him too. He did call me back like he said he would concerning an issue I had down on Galbraith Road concerning the new business that was having some issues about getting signage. He did follow up on that, but I didn't want to digress too far away from what you're saying, Don. But number one, I think it's got to be something, we can appropriate money. The only way I guess we could require them to do it is pass a specific ordinance to say, spend this money on this particular project. But I think if we just make sure we appropriate, as Sabrina mentioned, from the general fund into the proper account for that particular project to make it adequate that they can finish it. Hopefully they would take the initiative to go forward and complete the improvements that they feel necessary in the building department. Now, Mr. Brooks does work under the purview of how the administration wants them to function. Now, Mel and Sabrina, those monies were appropriated, and they were both as their own individual quote unquote type of sovereignty of their positions, asked for the funds, and they're spending it as we provided to them. I don't know that we can dictate to the administration how they should do this. We can suggest how we should be, and it would be better if we could communicate with them. Nobody's here tonight for the administration for this need. But I don't know that I would not do a separate fund. I don't think that's necessary. They don't have to spend it if they don't want to. Maybe they think they could use pencils and erasers, but that we can provide all the funding they want. But if they don't want to spend it, we can't dictate it to them, I don't believe, unless you want to start passing specific ordinances to take over the purview of the administration.
No, I don't want to do that, but Chris could, since we don't have the benefit of the mayor or Patrick here tonight, could you follow up on that and find out if they're interested? If they're not interested, I guess just let it go.
Okay, I will do that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Powell. I guess your report's over.
Yes, I was finished.
Okay, thank you. Laws and Contracts Chairwoman, Ms. Chico.
Thank you, Mr. Nesbitt. Tonight, we have an ordinance on the agenda authorizing the mayor and safety service director to enter into a contract with our city's career firefighters, which we kind of touched on earlier. I trust that everyone's had time to look over the contract, and I hope that we can suspend the rules for a second and third reading and vote to approve this so we can move forward and our city office can process the pay changes with next week's payroll due to the delay in negotiations because of COVID. Other than that, that's all I have for tonight. Anybody
All right.
has
Any questions?
I think we all got that same email from Patrick.
Yeah, the IAFF.
All right, I agree.
Okay.
It's probably a lot of paperwork that he has to go through the Diane's department here in payroll. So I would hate for her to be pressed at the last minute to try to get a lot of work done, personally, my opinion.
Right.
All right, thank you, Ms. Edichico. Public Health and Safety Chairman, Mr. Fishesher.
Thank you, Chris. First, I'd like to, who's talking in the background?
That's my answering machine.
First, I'd like to extend my sympathy to the family of Dr. Lamping, who passed away November 20th. He was a Reading doctor for years and years. Probably half of Reading went to either him or his partner, Dr. Duffner. But he passed away. And then the other family I'd like to send my sympathy to is the family of Lance Eastep, who passed away yesterday. Another Reading, longtime Reading resident and very good guy. He fought cancer for quite a few years, but lost yesterday. So my sympathy to both those families. Since the fire chief was our guest speaker, he's pretty well covered everything I needed to cover with them, but I will give you some updates from the police department. For the month of November, they had 1,235 calls for service, 21 auto accidents, 190 total charges filed, with 150 of them being original charges. Citations issued for the month: 24 to Arlington Heights Court, 6 to Hamilton County Court, 0 to Juvenile Court, and 98 to Reading Mayor's Court, for a total of 128 citations. Other operations, they're working on several assault charges, several thefts in the area of South Reading, gross sexual imposition charge, several drug-related charges, a hit skip on 3rd Street, and they're continuing to investigate the hit skip on Columbia and Hunt. The 3 cruisers that we bought are still waiting for equipment to be installed, for that scheduling to take place. We have a new police officer. Officer Samuel Cole was sworn in by Mayor Bemis and started with his field training officer on November 28th. Dispatcher Setters is out 4 to 6 weeks for shoulder surgery. And that is all I have, Chris.
Randy, I had a question in the safety department. Maybe you can shed some light on it. I brought it up at the last meeting when the service director was here. There's been several accidents at Columbia Avenue near Westview. Actually, the most recent, I think, about a month ago or 6 weeks ago, actually took the telephone pole completely out. I thought they were going to explore putting in a guardrail there. Do you have anything in safety to know whether that's going to be accomplished?
I haven't talked to Patrick about it, but I can check with him on that. I know it's actually where the pole sits is kind of unusual, because I would have thought that it would be on the other side of Westview, but it's on the high side of Westview that these poles keep getting hit. But I would think that, that we could probably, and I think he did indicate that he was going to look into that. So I'll get with him on that.
I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Randy, I have a question. I know we had talked about getting a sign on Cross County at the exit, no truck traffic, or diverting it down towards Scourth Road. Have we done anything with that, or?
No, Katie, my committee's going to get together. I'm not sure we'll make it before the first of the year, but we're going to look at all of Columbia Avenue from Cross County all the way down to Reading Road. There's been, Mr. Lind has requested that we have a study done by traffic people to evaluate Reading and Columbia to see if we could rearrange laning in that. to facilitate better traffic flow. You know, we do have the issue with the trucks coming down. Now it's not near as bad since some of the work that was going on during the summer is over now. One in particular was the bench project where the dump trucks were heading up and down. But it is something that, you know, I think that we need to look at as far as getting those trucks completely off of both Benson and Columbia Avenue and send them down. If they need to come into Reading, you know, they could either they could go down to Galbraith and come back up Reading Road. But again, I would like to have traffic engineers take a look at that and see if it's feasibility or not. But my committee, you know, it's one of the things I have on the agenda when my committee does get back together.
Thank you.
Yes. I just want to reiterate, we did talk about that last meeting about the safety committee and doing a traffic study on Columbia. So I'm in total agreement in our committee meeting and to discuss that situation.
You're on mute, Chris.
Okay, now I'm not. So
Now you're not.
There we
thank you, Mr. Fishesher. Service Chairman, Mr. Olbrich.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Service Department is going to go around one more time throughout the city to pick up leaves. They had to change over the trucks a couple days ago because of the snow, but they're going to refit a couple of them to picking up the leaves. Now, they won't do it till probably Thursday and Friday. They'll start because hopefully the snow will be melted by then and they'll be able to see the piles. Again, we recommend or let everybody know that they should not sweep them or rake them into the street. The service department has been spending time going around clearing out the catch basins of leaves because either people had put them in the street or they were washed down with the rain, etc. But they want to go around one more time and hopefully that'll take care of that. They are also going to have the mulcher out. They'll refit one of the trucks for that. So again, they're talking about, you know, at least a week or so to do that. However, they may do it more, especially if it doesn't snow. The Service Department was called out at 4:30 this morning. 3 trucks are out for the snow. They mainly did the main arteries and the hills. I think everybody knows that it was not a hard snow to take care of anyway, but we always do a good job whether it is or not. So that's been taken good. Our salt supply is good. The last 3 years, we've only used about 250 tons a year. And usually we use about 120 or 1,200 to 1,600 tons of salt. So over the last 3 years, we haven't even used an amount equal to the total that we use in a regular year. And we also have salt down on the Ohio River that we've ordered and it's waiting for us if and when we need that. So we're in good shape in that regard. I was happy to hear that it's the intention to hire, or actually this weekend, they're going to give a skills test for a truck driver. And that person, hopefully that they choose, will start January the 4th. Now, we had talked previously about hiring a mechanic, and they were going to hire one, and they offered the position to one of the individuals that was on the list, and he refused. And then later he called back and said he wanted to refuse it.
unfortunately, he was no longer eligible because the list became unusable. So I guess we still really need to have a mechanic. We only, in effect, have one that's really a mechanic. So hopefully, after the first year, we can address that again. I know it's a tough thing, but at least we got one more new truck driver because of that. Also, there have been some people that have talked to me about the light at the high school. And I talked to Matt Morgan this afternoon, and he said that they had taken care of that last week. There was a 24-volt connector that basically, I guess, got messed up. And so what it went into, the light went into just going ever so often on a regular basis rather than being controlled by the traffic itself. But that's been fixed. I thought it interesting that there were some people that had noticed that there were some rather lengthy lights on there instead of, again, being controlled by the traffic. So that's been taken care of, and that's it for tonight.
Okay. Any questions from Mr. Albrecht? Thank you, Mr. Albrecht, and then Recreation Chairman, Mr. Lynn.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to follow up what Tony was talking about. He said that $12,000 was spent on the parks in regards to a Duke grant. If he remembers, we talked about the need for tables and chairs at Hayfie Fieldhouse. I know that some of that was spent on the tables and chairs. That was my understanding, and that's what the administration used to purchase those. Also, garbage cans around the parks, I believe, is what was used to also spend some of that money. And then the other thing, I know that they did get a committee together, which included me, but I think COVID kind of put that on hold. I think they had maybe 2 meetings. I was able to attend one. But it was kind of a future meeting where they tried to get people around the community together to brainstorm some ideas of where they wanted the parks to go. But I think COVID kind of shut that down, and we haven't had any Zoom meetings or anything like that since the beginning of just maybe 1 or 2. I know Katie was part of that also, but I don't think it went any farther than 2 meetings. So I think that's still on the agenda to kind of follow up, but I haven't heard when that might happen. Just in other reports, Hayfie Fieldhouse is opened up for some VYO teams, but it's not open to the general public. Also, I want to just make sure that there will be no tree lighting ceremony or no movie this year because of COVID issues. And we did apply for the Parks grant, applied for the Reds grant that we always try to get for the topsoil on our baseball field. So we have just applied for that, and we should know if we get that grant in February. So that's all I have on my report.
Thank you, Tom, for bringing me up to speed. I appreciate that. Thank you for that information.
Okay. No other comments from Mr. Lynn? Thank you, Mr. Lynn. As we know, both the mayor and the safety service director are not with us tonight. I do want to apologize to the safety service director for some comments that were made at the last meeting that I did not respond correctly to or in a timely manner. And I will hope to remedy that rudeness towards some of our administrative officials in the future. Law Director, Mr. Stevenson.
Thank you, Chris. I don't have a report. I do have Mr. Braun would like to update council on the status of the litigation with the school at our next regularly scheduled meeting in an executive session. And I think that you'll need to address that with ICRC, Chris.
Okay.
And that would be on the 15th. And I haven't asked him whether he'd like to do it on the front end or the back end of the meeting, but my guess would be is he would prefer to do it on the front end of the meeting.
Okay.
If you can accomplish that. The other thing is with respect to the Duke pipeline, all the briefs have been filed. We're waiting to hear from the Supreme Court on whether or not there's going to be an oral argument. And I assume that there will be, but I don't know that it'll be until sometime next year.
All right, any other questions for the law director? Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Treasurer, Mr. Gertz.
Thank you, Chris. First off, I'd like to say it's great to be back. It's been a little crazy over it's been a little crazy over the past few months with all the activity at the Board of Elections. But just to give you all an update, I did send out the income tax receipt summary report for the month of November a little earlier this evening. So you should all have that in your email if you haven't seen it already. And just at a high level, November was a pretty good month for us. For the individual residence income taxes, we collected $76,487, which was $22,329 more than we took in last November. Year to date, we've taken in $1,211,213, and we're running 0.3% ahead of where we were last year for individual residence income taxes. For the business profits income tax, we took in $17,874, which was $4,232 more than we took in November in 2019. Year to date, we've taken in $510,659, and we're running 1.7%, or roughly $8,700 ahead of where we were last year for business profit income tax. And then for payroll withholding income taxes, November wasn't bad. We took in $483,331. So that was $28,600, almost $28,700 more than what we took in last November. Year to date, we've taken in $5,253,757, but we still are running 1.6% behind, which equates to roughly $86,600 year to date in payroll withholding income taxes. And as you all know, we've talked about this numerous times relative to COVID, and a lot of people were working from home or not working at all. So I don't know that we're going to be able to do a lot about the payroll withholding income tax recoup, but it's good on a couple of other fronts. So in total for income tax collections for November, we took in $577,693. So that was about 10.6% more than what we took in last November, or $55,256. Now, year to date, in total, we've taken in $6,975,629, and we're still running behind at $74,873, or 1.1%. So it's an improvement of where we were at the end of October, but we are still running about 75,000 behind year to date as compared to where we were in 2019. Now, we are sending out quarterly tax bills within the next week or two. A lot of people like to pay, they're due on January 15th, and a lot of people like to pay those taxes in the current calendar year so they can claim that as a tax deduction. So we'll see what happens here in December. But we're getting close. Our hope is, Tony had said earlier, our hope was that, I don't know, we're not going to hit the 3 to 5% increase, but I'm hoping that we at least break even or be a little bit ahead of where we were in 2019 by the time the year closes up. So that's all I've got for tonight, unless anybody has any questions.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gertz. And Auditor, Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think, I kind of talked about the CARES Act funding, as well as echo Mr. Lynn said about the $12,000. That is where I have it spent and just trying to finish up for the end of the year. I'm asking for all known payables to be in my office by December 4th. So that way Patrick and I can do the items for the county and give you guys the ordinance to have that breakdown for you. And I'm going to have the CARES Act funding ordinance coming up on the next meeting. And I think that's pretty much it. Just trying to close the end of the month and getting ready for the end of the year. That's all the updates for me. Thanks, Chris.
Right. Any questions for Ms. Smith? Thank you very much, Ms. Smith. Reading and vetting resolutions.
There are none.
Okay, then we will go ahead and have our first ordinance, which is a second reading.
Yeah, this is a second reading, an ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to execute utility easements, both permanent and temporary workspace easements on behalf of the city of Reading, and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend the rule requiring a third reading.
Second,
Motion made by Mr. Fischesser, seconded by Mr. Lindeman, to suspend the rule that requires a third reading. Roll call.
Mr. Powell,
Abstain because of conflict of interest.
Mr. Gertz,
No.
Mr. Lind,
Yes.
Mr. Albrecht, yes. Mr. Lindeman,
yes.
Mr. Fischesser,
Yes.
Mrs. Zetachico,
Yes.
5 yes, 1 abstention, or 1 no and 1 abstention. So I guess we have to have a third reading, right?
That was not for that. Yeah, that was, you're correct. That was for the suspension. So we will have a third reading. Our second ordinance.
An ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to execute utility easements, both permanent and it's the same one.
Yeah.
An ordinance amending ordinance numbers 2004-61 and 2017-02, removing optional health supplemental sickness and accident insurance for paid on call and part-time fire department members and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend the rules.
I'll second.
Motion made by Mr. Lindeman, seconded by Ms. Zetachico, to suspend the rule that requires a second and third reading for this ordinance for the supplemental sickness. Roll call.
Mr. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Gertz,
This, I understand, this was noted on the agenda as the third ordinance, but is that?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's.
I'll vote
Correct.
yes.
I must have skipped one.
Yes, I vote yes for this one.
Mr. Lind,
Yes.
Mr. Albrecht, yes. Mr. Lindeman,
Yes.
Mr. Fischesser,
Yes.
Mrs. Zetachico.
Yes.
That
Motion
motion
seven, yes.
passed.
Motion
Second.
to adopt.
Who made a motion to adopt? Thank you, Mr. Lynn. Second by Mr. Fischesser. Roll call.
Mr. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Gertz,
Yes.
Mr. Lind,
Yes.
Mr. Albrecht, yes. Mr. Lindeman,
Yes.
Mr. Fischesser,
Yes.
Mrs. Zetachico.
Yes.
7 yes.
That ordinance is adopted in ordinance number.
All right, you may have to help me on this. I think it's 48, 2020-48. Is that correct?
I don't have a minutes for last meeting to help you too much real quick here.
Hold on.
I'm not sure. I might be 47, I think, but I don't know.
Could be.
47.
Okay.
There we go. Thank you,
40.
Mrs. Zetachico.
Okay. All right, I must be missing a. Okay, I think I'm missing a thing.
You have the you have the header there. You can go ahead and read that.
An ordinance amending ordinance, no.
Number two on the
An
agenda.
ordinance authorizing the mayor and safety service director to enter into a contract with the City of Reading Career Firefighters Association, IAFF, the locals 3717, and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend the rules for a second and third reading?
Second,
Motion made by Ms. Adchico, seconded by Mr. Powell to suspend the rule that requires a second and third reading. Roll call.
Mr. Powell,
yes.
Mr. Gertz,
No,
Mr. Lind,
Yes.
Mr. Albrecht, yes. Mr. Lindeman,
Yes.
Mr. Fischesser,
Yes.
Mrs. Adchico,
Yes.
That
6-1.
motion passed.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Motion made by
discussion.
Mr. Lindeman.
I'd like to have a little discussion if I could.
Okay.
As I outlined earlier about the finances, I have no well, I shouldn't say I have no problem, but I could recognize doing something for 2020, but to extend this out for 2021, 22, and 23 for an additional 2.5% per year, I think is somewhat irresponsible at this point, not knowing what is going to happen in the ensuing next few years. I do recall that we had a presentation about the justification that I know was mentioned that fire department personnel, paramedics did not receive an increase, but that was a negotiated arrangement that was designed to relate to the income tax increases that was agreed to. I mean, had our income taxes catapulted in many ways, they would have enjoyed a very high increase. It was a decision, I call it a gamble, that was taken. So it didn't pan out the way they had hoped, but we did have a contract that provided for possible increase in wages, and it didn't pan out the way they wanted. So merely to say they had no increase was not a result of the city's failure to negotiate in good faith. I am worried about the next 2 or 3 years, if we could do a bonus or did something of that nature for this year, for those people that are full-time fire and paramedic people. I could recognize that. I would point out that typically I know we're going to hear about all the overtime and so forth, but a lot of employees of the city would like to get overtime, frankly. But these gentlemen and ladies that are participants, I don't know if I have a lady, I can't remember, but they are part of the highest paid employees in the city, and there are people in the community who are suffering of unemployment and businesses that are suffering. I think it would be inappropriate for us to design a contract for 3 more years at 2.5% automatic increases when we don't have any idea where we're going to stand financially in the next 3 years. Thank you.
Chris,
Mr. Lindeman, go ahead.
I don't want to argue with Mr. Gertz's thoughts there, but I think that most people would agree that this year is probably one of the worst years 6 months ago, whether we were going to be able to make payroll every payroll. So I don't think we can look into the future. Nobody has a crystal ball. I think that the raise that they're asking for, to me, is very reasonable. I think that they've gone above and beyond, as well as the police and the Public Works Department. So I think that hopefully we'll have the income to meet that pay raise. And if we don't, I'm sure that we can renegotiate. These people are reasonable. That's all I have to
Any
say.
other comments?
I
Then
just
I
want
have
to
a
say
motion. Go ahead.
that I think it's fair and in the interest of keeping and retaining firefighters instead of them looking elsewhere. And also, speaking about overtime, if you look at the contract, it looks like they're going to an EDO, an earned day off schedule. So that helps eliminate a lot of the overtime. They accrue so many hours and then they get a day off.
Okay. All right, so I have a motion made by Mr. Lindeman, seconded by Mr. Lynn to adopt the ordinance. Roll call.
Mr. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Gertz,
No,
Mr. Lind,
Yes.
Mr. Albrecht, yes. Mr. Lindeman,
Yes.
Mr. Fischesser,
Abstain.
Mr. Edichico, Mrs. Edichico.
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted.
511.
In the ordinance number?
2020-48.
Okay. Any other business?
yes.
Go ahead, Mr. Gertz.
I think we all should note that the Planning Commission is going to have a public hearing on December the 7th at 6:30 to review the proposed changes in the zoning code. I think it's paramount that we each as councilmen become aware of the content. One thing that worries me on the issue that's in the proposed new zoning code or new building code and so forth is the fact that they're going to eliminate underground wiring in certain areas and times. I think it's inappropriate for this to be handled at the point in time when we're actually in the midst of litigation. It's not my purview. I guess it's really more Mr. Stevenson's, but I'm uncomfortable about acting upon stuff that could have an impact in relation to our future actions that are going to be potentially litigated, and there's going to be greater participation, I think, in the future of people who are going to want to weigh in on this. It is a public hearing. And I don't know what they're going to do with City Hall being closed. I don't know if it'll be reopened by December the 7th or not. Hopefully there'll be a publication or some information if it's moved to the field house or some other location, but it is public. I wouldn't want the people in the community to know that it's public, and any council person who wants to attend certainly has a right to do that. So hopefully that'll be followed up upon. The last meeting, the other thing I had, which concerns me greatly, is I brought this up, and I have Mr. Ross is not here tonight, and I don't know if anyone has communication, but the community development block grant monies for the year 21, 22, and 23, I think we projected, if I understood it correctly, $123,000 potential grant that we could receive, but I don't think any definitive decision was made or recommended. I don't know the date. I thought it was the end of December. I'm hoping it wasn't the end of November, as we were told about the use of the monies for 18, 19, and 20. But I don't want us to miss the opportunity, and I'm still want to pursue with some flood remediation. It doesn't have to be another bench. It could be the acquisition of properties that could be acquired in such a way as to provide both benefit to the business district as well as for use of future bench projects or other forms of flood remediation. So I hope someone, maybe Mr. President, you or someone that has good rapport with the administration. I have not got any feedback from anybody about this from the administration. I raised it at the last meeting, but I think we need to make sure that we don't miss out on our submission. There were public hearings in other communities on what the proper use should be for their community development block grant money, but we had no such public meetings, and the only one that we really had was two or whenever it was, the last council meeting. It does worry me. I'm concerned that I don't want to lose those funds. So hopefully someone at the powers to be will communicate to let us know if we have to have another special meeting or something to make the decision. I think it would be paramount to do that. Thank you.
My understanding was that we did give Mr. Ross a directive to two different options. One was to purchase dilapidated property for any number of reasons. One might be for tear down for a future bench project. Does anyone remember exactly what the wording was on the second one? I thought it was for like,
The second
yeah, the
one was
second,
for a bathroom at Canaan Park, I believe.
I thought that was for the
I thought it
monies
was
from
Canaan
18,
Park
19, and 20.
We already blew that one once, but it was passed by council again at the last meeting to spend the money of about 145,000 in that range for the 18, 19, 20 money for the bathrooms at Canning Park. Now, we already have all of the architectural plans. I guess they'll have to be adjusted. But that was for the past 3 years. And if we had not done something, we'd have lost that money. Now that has to be spent by September of next year, I'm told.
That's correct. And
And then
so,
I don't think we voted on anything to my recollection. Now, maybe Mr. Albrecht could provide us the records from the clerk, but I don't recall there being any. We had discussions about possible uses, but I don't remember any recommendations. Now, neither of those do I necessarily. Dilapidated property might be something if it's in the floodplain area, I would not object to, but I don't recall there being any specifics. If they were, then I apologize, but I don't recall there being any specific.
Katie, do you remember a set?
Yes, I have it right here, my notes from the last meeting. For 18, 19, and 20, we decided as council for the bathrooms at Canning, and to use some of that to pave Benson Street, 2021 dilapidated properties, and also to put that money into also paving Benson Street. And I know that we had talked about it at the last meeting. I believe that's what we had all agreed on.
Yes.
I don't
Right.
remember agreeing on the last ones. I think we talked about it, but I don't remember that being a recommendation. We voted on the restrooms.
I don't think you agreed on it, Tony.
Yeah, I think you may have been the only one who didn't agree.
I don't think we voted on it.
Well, I remember distinctly saying that I had 5 to 1 or 2 that wanted to go in that direction.
But that was-
ICRC makes the meetings available. If you want to go back and take a look at what was discussed, you go right ahead. But I remember a 5 to at least 1 or maybe 2, maybe there was an abstention, voting for what Ms. Chico just said.
Well, it should be correctly put into the minutes, not that I have to go and make an effort to see what's in on the ICRC.
Of course.
My recollection, we only voted for one project, and that was 18, 19, and 20 for the restrooms. But if I I don't remember a vote for
It
21.
was not a conventional
We
vote.
talked about it.
It was
Oh, hey,
individuals
Chris, can we
mentioning
take a
what they
vote right
wanted to.
now?
Pardon me?
Yes, I think that's a good idea, Mr. Fisher.
Couldn't we take a vote right now?
I think.
Well, I
should
thought
look
we
at
did
it.
a vote last
We
week.
did
if,
a vote.
you know,
The
I
last
think
meeting.
we did. I think we
We-
did vote, and I think
Did
that.
yay or nay?
Mr.
I went around the table and I asked everyone what they wanted to spend it on, and it came out 5 to 2 for
Remember the vote
dilapidated
being 5 to 2,
buildings and-
but I
and
remember we
Benson.
talked about it and gave Mr. Ross permission to proceed with those
Yes, we
2
did.
projects. That's my recollection. It should be in the minutes.
That's what I thought too, but if Tony wants a vote, we could vote.
I just think it's redundant.
I'm not interested in another vote. So I think we've exhausted that. Any other business?
I just want to mention one thing. I asked Mr. Ross to give me a list of all the residents that would be affected by the pipeline. And he promptly sent me, I guess he through Duke Energy, 2 pages of those properties that are affected. And I would suggest, if it's Mr. Gertz's ward, certainly I would request from Patrick copies of this and anybody else that's interested, because there's a lot of names on there we know. And I think it wouldn't hurt to have a council person talk to them and just make sure that they know what their rights are before they sign
Yes.
contracts.
Okay.
I don't know what contracts they would be signing because we voted to accept all the.
This is residential. These people, if it's in their front yard, they have the option of working out how it's dealt with Duke, whether they get paid or not paid or whatever it is. Maybe Katie will look into it.
I had a question for the law director. I forgot to state, since you're still here. Do you know if, off the top of your head, I know that any kind of condemnation for road purposes is a quick take, meaning that they place the money with the court system and they can go ahead and build the project. Do you know offhand whether they get a quick take on the construction of gas lines and so forth?
I do not.
Okay.
Okay, any other business? Then this meeting's adjourned, and we'll see you in 2 weeks on December 15th. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris.
We'll see ya.
Thank you.